Hi, and welcome back to the Drama Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm so excited you're joining me for today's episode. You guys know I love to nerd out on things like nervous system healing and the mind body connection. So today's guest, Jen Mann, is got so much wisdom to share on this topic. So Jen is a nervous system practitioner, business founder, and author. So she is in addition to being a mind body practitioner, she's a yoga instructor, and she talks about how she found her way there through her experience as a professional ballet dancer. She's a functional movement therapist, and she also has battled severe chronic fatigue. She began researching alternative approaches to healing chronic fatigue and similar conditions and was able to completely recover using trauma-informed mind-body healing. Today, she leads a community of over 100,000 followers on Instagram and is the co-founder of Chronic Fatigue School, which has helped thousands of people globally better regulate their nervous systems to help find healing. She is also the co-author of the book in the Secret Language of the Body. So in this book, she and her co-author guide you through how to listen to the messages in the body and learn your limits and find that Goldilocks zone, so to speak, of nervous system function, aka the ventral vagal social engagement system, which we talk a little bit about in today's episode. So if you're like, what do all those things mean? What is the ventral vagal system? How do I even start with healing my nervous system? Like, this episode is for you. Jen's got a lot of wisdom to share, like I said, and I really hope that you enjoy today's episode and find it helpful. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and author, and I'm here to help you streamline your wellness routine and establish a sane, more balanced relationship with food and fitness so you can reach your goals without losing your mind. On this podcast, we'll talk about nutrition, exercise, self-care, mindset, and more. I'll be bringing you interviews and expert insight on the topics that matter to your health and wellness. Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
Yeah, I was really excited to talk to you today because the work that you're doing around, mind body work and addressing nervous system healing just really speaks to me as a person and a professional. But I always like asking my guests kind of their origin story. And I'd love for you to share with our guests a little bit of, our listeners, excuse me, of, what inspired you to go into this field?
Yeah. So I'm going to literally give you my origin story because that's how it all unraveled. But I used to be a professional ballet dancer from a very young age, and going into ballet, I was already carrying with me some anxiety patterns from my childhood. And ballet is a very intense environment where I experienced a lot of emotional and verbal abuse, and I was often injured. So there were these elements weaving into each other of anxiety, injury. So I was already asking myself questions like, I wonder if the injury and the tension and the anxiety that I feel every day are connected. So I sort of kept going along my way in my career of ballet. And then I had this one big injury that made me shift paths. And I became a yoga teacher, Pilates instructor, a functional movement therapist, and everything that would help people move better and feel better. But I was always drawn to those types of clients that had these unsolvable issues. And I felt like I really resonated with them because a lot of my injuries, often doctors would say, this is chronic, it's not your technique, we're not sure, maybe it's. So I always felt like I resonated with that type of client. And then I went back to school to study biomedical sciences and physiotherapy. And that really kickstarted patterns that started in my childhood, then became even stronger in my years of adolescence and my early 20s in ballet, which were perfectionism, pushing myself to my limits, ignoring the messages coming from my body, pleading me to slow down. And when I went back to school, I found myself in yet another or that's what I felt, competitive environment. And, straight A student, really, really striving to achieve. I was class president in one of the best universities in London, and that gave me a lot of stress. So my body started to give me signs that it was time to sort of either change or slow down. But I wasn't listening because, I kept pushing, and I crashed with multiple chronic illnesses. And I was diagnosed in early 2020 with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic pain patterns, long COVID as well. And I became completely bedbound. So from being this yogi, ex dancer, Pilates, functional movement therapist, physical therapist, working with clients and patients, hospital, yoga studio, all of a sudden I couldn't get out of bed. And I was just completely bedbound with more than 30 symptoms, what felt like overnight, but in hindsight, I always start from the beginning because that's where it all began. But, I reached a moment where it was a bit too much and my body decided to shut down. So my pull to this work, to helping people regulate their nervous systems and recover from mind body illnesses, really comes from my experience as of being an embodied human as a dancer, and then helping people move better and feel better, and then myself getting a chronic illness and getting no answers from conventional medicine. So I tried everything. I was studying in a medical university, so I was, all on board with all the therapies, but nothing worked until something did. And it was the work of somatic therapy, brain retraining, and everything that has to do with putting your nervous system at the forefront of your recovery.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate. I know I've had my own journeys with things where the body decides enough is enough. And it's funny growing up. My mother, who's she's a psychotherapist, but she's also she found her way there through hypnotherapy and other alternative healing modalities. And she always used to say to me that if we don't take time to rest, our body chooses that time for us, and
Yeah.
it is so right. It's one of those lessons I feel like I've continued to learn the hard way over and over. Hopefully, have made progress there. Just my own journey with nervous system work, but it's something I think a lot of people are not very attuned to. We don't really live in a society that really encourages us to slow down, listen, take breaks when we need. It's like go, go, go all the time. And especially when you have perfectionism in the mix, kind of, which I can relate to that, like driving the bus, it can be extra hard to take those steps back when we need to. And, that's so thank you for sharing that with us. And for
Yeah.
for our listeners who maybe, you know, they might not have that background or that really much of an introduction to like mind body healing, but why is this approach so important, especially when it comes to things like trauma or managing more like complex conditions, like you were talking about your experience with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia? Like, why is this so important that we take this approach?
I love this question so much because it's at the pinnacle of why my recovery was so fast, and the gap where conventional medicine says that it takes so long, if not never, to recover from these. And the reason is that when you take the mind, thoughts, emotions, memory, trauma of the brain, and separate it from the experience of the body, the emotions, the trauma, the same things, but in the body, when you separate the two and you look at the body as a robot of parts and the mind is its own machine, it's really hard to heal those processes that are so interconnected. The mind and body are one through the mind body connection, and the mind body connection is the brain and the nervous system. And our brain and body are constantly speaking to one another. We are alive because we have a nervous system. We feel emotions, we think thoughts, we know that we're hungry, we know that we are attracted to someone, or that we a certain environment is good for us or not, because we have a nervous system. And the element of connecting the mind, our thoughts, and the body really allows us to go deep into the root of what is causing these more complex mind body disorders and to really go at the root of some of the unresolved trauma responses that are showing up in the body. We know we're anxious, we know we have PTSD, we know we're depressed because we overwhelmingly feel it in our body. Yes, we are attuned to the thoughts that come with it, but when you take a moment to learn how to dip into the ocean of the body and slow down and feel the sensations and the emotions and the parts of the body that are tense that connect to our thoughts, our triggers, our experiences, there's this whole world that unravels. And it's just one. It's not mind and body. It's all of a sudden the nervous system and this one highway of communication where it just goes back and forth all the time. And so addressing the whole system as one really allows for these patterns that keep us stuck, like in unresolved trauma and complex chronic illnesses, to go away and for us to really find healing and recovery.
Thank you so much for illustrating that so well. I love that description, especially of the highway. It's, I think,
Mhm.
something a lot of people can visualize really clearly. And
Mm.
so kind of building on that, I love, like, I was saying I love interviewing authors on this podcast because I know I've, having been through that journey and just like all the thought that goes into creating a book, and then you have to like go out and market that book. It's like that's a whole other thing. But I loved the way that you structured this book into mind, body, and human sections, and that then you broke each section down into awareness, disruption, and redesign. Like, I just
Mm.
love that so much. And, how can, this approach help us, or how can it, I love that you broke it down this way and you structure
Mm.
this way. And like, how can that help us make the concept and the process of changing our behaviors to better support this healing process, more approachable? Because I feel like a lot of people, you tell them like, oh, you have to heal your nervous system. They'd be like, yeah, it's great. How, where, how, when do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, what does that mean? What does that even mean? That's one of the most questions. So it's like, what does it mean when you talk? Yeah, I love this question. So Cardin, who's the co-author of this book, so first of all, let me go back to I was sharing reels on Instagram 2 years ago of nervous system practices that were very practical and accessible, literally exercises. I can share a couple with you today as well. And they were really resonating and going viral. So HarperCollins reached out to me in my DMs and asked me, do you want to write a book about this? And when you don't have a book, you have to come up with a proposal. And, there was a time crunch. So I invited my business partner in because we were in this together. And we thought, what is the best way to, succinctly give people a way through not just, adversity, complex illness, behavior, and like the stuckness that we find ourselves in life, but what is a way through where you actually get to learn more about yourself and you get to intuitively listen to the language that your body speaks. So instead of applying an approach that's, A plus B equals C, it's a very intuitive approach where you are now aware of what's happening. So we decided to cut it into three parts: the mind, the body, and the human. And mind and body really dive into the processes of the mind and the body, but really how they connect and how one is not possible without the other. And how, when we learn these exercises that help us rewire the patterns that keep us stuck, you are really integrating both at the same time. And then human is that aspect that is at the very heart of our vulnerability, of why we get stuck, of that part of us that, makes us different from all other animals in the world, right? Humans have that element of, you know, having this whole process of our childhood, the attachment figures in our life with our parents, and how that all creates a personality and how we move through life and ultimately how we deal with stress. So, mind, body, human, we go through the AIR approach: awareness, interruption, and redesign. And in order to change anything in your life, something needs to change, but you cannot change what you don't even know needs changing. So, the first step to any healing approach, in our opinion and in my experience, is awareness. I have chronic fatigue. I have pain in my body. I have, achy throat, and I have headaches. But when you look at my body, everything's fine. There's all the blood tests were coming back fine and normal. So, what is actually going on, and why is it that the individual systems and body parts are, when you investigate them, are actually quite healthy? So, there's a mechanism there that's happening. So, awareness helps you dive into learning the messages, that language of the body, meaning learning to listen and tune into sensations, emotions, and heartbeat, your breath, feelings, and really learning what these mean and how they translate to a pattern that might be comfortable or not. So when we're in an experience that is triggering and we are aware of it, we're then able to take action. But when we're triggered and we don't know why, but we just feel overwhelmed, that's when we get stuck. So awareness is the first step, and then interruption is all these nervous system exercises that are drawn from polyvagal theory, from neurolinguistic programming, from all these therapies, hypnotherapy, neurorehabilitation, that allow the brain and body to converse and interrupt the pattern, the stress pattern in the brain. And then the redesign is through repetition of awareness and interruption, you can have a new outcome. So that's really how I recovered and how I help people today through this process of becoming aware of the patterns that are keeping you stuck, interrupting them and creating new ones, but not just through the mind, utilizing the body and learning that language that is being spoken to us in any moment of our life.
Love that so much, and that was actually something I really loved about this book was the use of polyvagal theory. That really speaks to me. Polyvagal theory, which you just alluded to, there's this window of tolerance. Could you describe for our listeners what
Yeah.
that is and why knowing that can really help us approach this healing and just life on this planet in a mindful way?
Yes. Absolutely. So polyvagal theory, I'll give a little explanation of that and then I'll go into the window of tolerance, is this helpful framework that helps us better understand our stress responses, our survival responses, where in any given triggering situation, I might respond with anxiety and you might respond with a shutdown response, and someone else might respond with anger or a fight response. So, learning what system we are in this polyvagal theory approach can be really helpful to, learn and become aware of those patterns. Where the window of tolerance comes in, which is a term that was coined by Dan Siegel in one of his books, I believe in 1999. So it's been around for a while, but it's only really being talked about in the recent years. The window of tolerance is this experience of emotion, physical experience, cognitive experience, where we have a certain capacity of dealing with anything that comes at us, a certain amount of exercise that we can do, a certain amount of emotional turmoil that we can deal with, a certain amount of decision making and organizing and planning that we can deal with. And each of us, because of our experiences in life, have a different window of tolerance. Some of us can only deal with so much. Maybe we have an argument with a friend and then it's really overwhelming and we shut down and we need to, take a break for a few days from socializing, and others have an argument and, that's fine. I'm still within my window of tolerance. So what happens in this framework of the nervous system within the window of tolerance is you have an experience that moves you into a state that's not your most calm and regulated state. And that could be in a state that is very activating, like the fight or flight response, where we're either angry or we're anxious. We have all of this energy in our body, and we might feel anxiety, or we might want to take action in a way that that seems on the other side that we're being excessively angry. And then there's another response where we might freeze and not know how to respond and feel really stuck, or a shutdown response where we just completely shut down and feel things like depression, low mood, negativity. And so let's say that a person's window of tolerance looks like they wake up in the morning and they have some coffee, and then they go to work, and they're relatively activated. They're still, relatively at ease. Maybe they had to run to catch the tube, or if you're in the car, you're just relaxing. And then you get to work and everything is still fine. You're riding the wave of the day, and then maybe you have a meeting with your boss, and the meeting comes by surprise, and maybe your boss has some negative feedback for you, and so that is an experience that might be quite triggering for some of us. And so the window of tolerance for that person who feels that it's very triggering might diminish, meaning that they might hit a point where it's too much stress. And so later on that evening, they might have a headache or a stomach ache, or not want to eat and not know why. How many times have we had a stomach ache and wonder, what was it that I had for lunch again? Was it the chicken salad? Yeah, no, I had that yesterday. And then we're like, oh, wait, I had that really stressful meeting with my boss, and that created a lot of stress in my body, tension in my organs, in my nerves, and now I have a tummy ache. So that awareness helps so much, because we can then down regulate that response. And so within this window of tolerance, knowing where we're at in any given moment, you might have a very wide window of tolerance when you have less work, when you have less triggers, when, if family is triggering, which it can be for some, maybe around the holidays, your window of tolerance goes down a little bit because there's a lot of emotional turmoil. Maybe you just finished university and you have to apply for job after job after job after job, and that's a very stressful experience. And so your window of tolerance might go down a bit. So knowing how to respond to the movement of our window of tolerance is so beneficial, because we can take action by slowing down, resting, setting boundaries, and saying, okay, maybe actually I need a rest from family tomorrow, and I'm going to say no, and I'm going to go and do something that I need and that I know will help me feel good. So it's really this, again, awareness really of how we respond. And there are tools and techniques that help us increase our tolerance for stress. And as we know in life, you cannot eliminate stress. You can find ways to implement self-care routines, and really listen to our needs and make sure that we're doing things that bring us joy. But stress is going to be everywhere. Even, I moved to Bali 2 years ago now, and there's stress on Bali too, on the contrary to what people might think, So stress is an experience that we need to learn to expand to, and learning where our window of tolerance lies can be really helpful for that experience.
Thank you so much for explaining that. I wish that that was something that they taught in schools for
Mhm.
children, just to
Yeah.
help us like learn how to be a human on this planet.
Mm.
But something I really love about your work is that you talk about, and I found this really I found very meaningful. You talk about in the book how calm is in the body and not the mind. And I would love for you to share with us, like, what is something that you really want people to know about this?
I love that. Our body has a system of balance, and the system of balance is called homeostasis. And we're in constant search for homeostasis. And our body does this, by changing hormone responses and electrical and chemical impulses. And the orchestra director of all of this is our brain, who our brain is an organ that receives information from the body and then it gives back information into the body. And then this translates into hormones, neurons, all the things and all the communication. So when we are looking to find that balance, it's all about the information that our mind is receiving from our body, because the system that helps the body enter a rest and digest and find a regulatory response to reach homeostasis is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is guided by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, which is it innervates into all of our vital organs, sends 80% of its information up into the brain. So when we're receiving 80% of this information up and into the brain, not knowing what this information is, our mind, which is a meaning making machine, needs to make meaning of this information that it's receiving. So if we're receiving information of calm, relaxation, homeostasis, our mind as a result is calm and moving, our cognitive, our prefrontal cortex is switched on, and we can think clearly, we're not activated. But when our body is sending signals to the brain of stress and overwhelm and not homeostasis and balance, then our mind needs to make meaning. And because it doesn't quite speak the language of the body yet until we learn that communication, that can result in, catastrophizing, rumination, worrying. So really begins in the body when there's a sense of safety felt in the body. And then when the felt sense of safety is reached through various techniques, through, either awareness interruption redesign or the support of a therapist, or doing more of what you love, or quitting the job that you know that isn't good for you, or saying no more often when you've been saying yes and you're so tired, or slowing down, doing the things that are good for you, and you start to feel the safety in your body, then you are truly calm on a physiological level. And that's when the information reaches the mind, and then we can think and feel calm. But that is why, when we feel activated and someone tells you, who's on the outside of your experience, like, calm down. That message is going into the mind, and you're telling your body, and your body is like, it doesn't work that way. I feel the stuff and I tell you what's happening. And then you have to help me make sense and send the message back down. So it's really this cycle of mind body information through this highway of this information going back and forth. And when we realize that we have so much accessibility through the body, which, believe it or not, is so much easier because our mind can do so much to help protect us, but really it's not achieving the goal of calm. It's instead perceiving overwhelm, and it's being stuck. So I think it's really powerful to have that deep understanding that an emotional experience that is helpful and unhelpful is felt in the body first. And so when we want to achieve a state of calm, going via the body is so helpful and so much more achievable, accessible, long term worth than going via the mind.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I know you've touched on a few really important ones here, but I think something I certainly have seen in my work, and something I myself experienced, when I was dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma and PTSD, in my 20s and even into my early 30s. But the way that, how do I phrase this? Like, we're not always attuned to recognize when our nervous system is out of balance. Like we were talking earlier, we live in such a culture that prioritizes productivity and doing as much as you can and not slowing down, and just really not, like, kind of doing the opposite of everything that you and I are talking
Mhm.
about, in terms of staying in touch with your brain and body, keeping them connected. But what are some signs for someone who, again, is maybe not used to checking in, some signs that their nervous system might be out of balance?
So important. So I'll start with the body. So some physical signs are you've had a night's sleep and you wake up tired. It's the end of the day, you're exhausted and you can't fall asleep. You have maybe a coffee that you're used to having every day, but now that coffee is really affecting your heart and you feel palpitations and you can feel your mind racing. You get lower back pain, maybe. You have tension in your neck, very tight shoulders and an achiness in your shoulder blades. You've been to the chiropractor, osteopath, physio, you get weekly massages, that pain keeps coming back. Autoimmune issues, skin conditions like acne or psoriasis or rosacea. Those are really signs that the body needs something different than what you're giving it, both literally, as you very well know, because I know that your job is with nutrition, but also what you're giving it emotionally and mentally, and what your body is feeling. So that's the physical sign, a lot of the physical signs like headaches as well, and physical symptoms that are unexplained, essentially, gut sensitivities. And then emotional is you're feeling a lot more moody than usual in an unexplained way. So maybe the appropriate response would be to just be sad about whatever's happening or be anxious or be afraid. And instead, you feel an overwhelming feeling that you need to like close yourself in your room, turn the light off, and sleep for 3 days. So, this kind of exaggerated emotional response, and where you're feeling stuck there's no way out, like a desperation, whether it's toward anxiety or depression or any other experience in that spectrum. And then cognitively, brain fog, inability to think clearly, your senses are impaired as well. So it's very often that someone will say, like, I don't know why, but I have this blurry vision and it's really hard for me to study or work or read, or light sensitivity or skin sensitivity. I mean, the list is very long, but it's true, all these. And I'm saying as many as I can because two or three are enough for someone to have an aha moment and say, oh, maybe it's not, XYZ. Maybe I'm just really stressed and I need to make some changes in my life. And that's why I keep getting these tummy aches or these headaches or this low back pain. Yeah, those are some of the most common signs that we see.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think I know a lot of our listeners will feel like, oh, that tracks. Okay. So what might be a most important first step or first few steps to getting your nervous system back on track if you recognize that it is out of balance?
So, one of the things that I think we take for granted is that we're just going to wake up and get through the day. And our body is going to move us through life and we're going to make these decisions and choices. And it doesn't really matter if they're that great for us in that moment because, we're going to get to the end of the day anyway. But when we tune into our actual needs, oh, actually, I'm really thirsty. My body is asking me, like, I need water. I haven't had water all day, drinking the water. Oh, I've had 3 coffees, and I can really sense that I should not be having 3 coffees a day. Or moving. Have I moved today? Making sure that we're moving, that we're tending to our needs, that we're eating nourishing foods that make us feel good and that are, nutritionally very important for our body. Sunlight, sleep, the basics. These are the things that help you kind of find a little bit of a baseline again. It's so common for us to go through just the basics and for people to say, oh, yeah, I haven't exercised in 3 weeks or 2 months or 3 years, or yeah, I never really go outside on my break, or I don't drink a lot of water. And then when you hit those points, some of the changes instantly that happen just on a physiological level already help you feel more in balance. And then when you're tending to your basic needs, just checking in with yourself. I think it can be so powerful to ask ourselves this one question every day, which is, what's happening for me right now? How am I feeling? And just becoming aware of the state that we're in, and then taking action based on what our needs are as a consequence. Yeah, I think that can be a really easy, accessible way forward. And then I always say this, but the easiest way to heal, to repair, to feel better is to do more of what we love. And so if we know, for some of us, it can be hard to even know what we love doing. But for a lot of us, when we know what those things are, just making sure we're implementing those throughout our day and that we really are taking the time to give our body that goodness. So it has the time and space to release those good hormones, be in harmony, and help us on our journey of whatever that might be, whether it's healing your body, your traumas, emotions, changing your behaviors, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. I love that. And I'm all about the approachable tips because I find that it is so easy for people to get overwhelmed with all the information and advice out there and to know what apply to our own life. And so thank you for sharing those.
Thank you.
Now, I I I could talk to you about this stuff all day. I so appreciate the work that you're doing. And if somebody wants to connect with you, learn more about your work, buy your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
So on Instagram, I am Jen Mann, and I am on there a lot. I love to share the most accessible way to start healing yourself emotionally, physically, unresolved trauma, symptoms. So it would be there. And then that's where we talk about the book as well, and the program, and the company Instagram is at Somia International. And at Somia, I have a program called Heal, where my business partner Cardin and I help people recover from chronic illnesses. We've had more than 2,500 people take our course and find full recovery from years of all of the chronic illnesses that have been mentioned in this chat so far. So yeah, so I would say Instagram is the best place.
Great. And we'll be sure to link to all of that in the show notes. So if all right, I have one question that I ask all my guests. This is sort of like our signature question on this podcast. And that question, and I understand that this is something that can evolve like over time, day to day even, but today at this moment in time, what does healthy living mean to you?
So before I got sick, to me, healthy living meant eating the right foods, exercising every day, using my brain every day, just on paper, doing all the things that I thought, getting enough sleep. Then after I got sick, to me, healthy living is taking personal responsibility and choosing yourself, and taking personal responsibility for the patterns that you recognize that you're still stuck in, and choosing yourself by learning how to set those boundaries that are needed, whether it's work or family or friends, anything with yourself, setting boundaries, saying no when you want to say no, and doing more of what you authentically love. I think that feeling good in our bodies and connecting to your purpose or your loved ones, or so important for our physiology. And it's amazing when the nervous system, when our brain, when our body gets a little bit of that connection to what brings us joy and what makes us feel grounded and safe, there's not much else that it needs to be healthy and thrive.
Amazing. I could not love that more.
Mhm.
So, Jen, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. I have so enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
And for all of you guys who are out there listening, as always, thank you for being here. We could not do this podcast without you. Please check out Secret Language of the Body. And if you like today's episode, let us know. Post a screenshot of you listening, tag me, tag Jen. You can also consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. They do matter and help me continue to bring you great guests like today's awesome guest, Jen Mann. So, as always, you guys have a wonderful day and we'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. We'll see you next time.